Alright guys, so now we've got another problem here where we're going to factor a trinomial, but this time we're going to make it a little bit tougher. Um, this time, if you look out in front here, we've got what we call a leading coefficient. There's just this big number 2 right here in the front. Um, so it makes it a little bit harder when we're trying to factor these things, and it actually gives us several steps. There's actually 5 steps we've got to go through to solve this. But it's actually not very hard if you just follow along all the way through this. So let's go ahead and get started here. So step 1, we're going to take the leading coefficient, the number out in front, we're going to multiply that times the number in the back. So we're going to do 2 times 5. Now, when you do that, when you move that to the back, you got 2 times 5, so we're going to write down 10, because positive 2 times positive 5 is a positive 10. And I like to write this backwards, going from right to left, just to make sure that I get everything in order here. I didn't do anything to this middle term, so I'm going to bring it down. Just going to bring it straight down to our answer. So it's a negative 11x. And then again, since I moved the 2 from the front all the way to the back, it's no longer in the front now, right? So just going to bring down x squared. So that was step 1. I took the front term, the leading coefficient, and multiplied it times the number all the way in the back. Now what we've got to do, our second step, is we've got to factor this new trinomial we just came up with, x squared minus 11x plus 10. So I'll go ahead and draw my sets of parentheses and draw in my x's like I've been used to doing. And now I've got to take the factors of 10. So we know that 1 times 10 gives me 10, and I know that 2 times 5 gives me 10. Okay, those are all the factors of 10. So we know these multiply together to get 10, but which ones add together to get 11? And that's pretty obvious, I think. 1 plus 10 is going to give me 11. So those are the numbers I'm going to use. So I'm going to put those in the second positions. So we have 1 and 10. Now, again, we look to this sign right here to tell me if they're both going to be positive or they're both going to be negative. And since this is a positive number, we know they're both going to be positive or negative, one of those others. We're not going to have different signs in our answer. Now we have to look to this front sign to see what they're going to be. Since it's a negative sign, that means we're going to have both negatives in here. And we could go through and double check that if we needed to, but I'm just going to show you. Negative 1 times negative 10 is positive 10. Negative 1 minus 10, if you put that in your calculator, gives you negative 11. And anytime you're dealing with negatives, I always suggest use your calculator to double check your answers to make sure you're doing it correctly, because negatives can be confusing. So now what we're going to do in step 3 is we're going to come back to this answer we just got right here, and we're going to divide by our leading coefficient from up here at the very beginning of the problem. So to do that, I'm just highlighting the 2 there, and now I'm going to put it underneath both of my numbers, just like that. So I've taken our answer and I'm dividing by 2. If this had been a 3, I would have divided by 3. If this had been a 7, I would have divided by 7. So it just depends on whatever the leading coefficient is. Now my next step is that I'm just going to go ahead and divide these things out, okay? So I'm going to rewrite it down here. X minus 1/2. That doesn't simplify any, so I'm just going to bring it on down. And then x minus 5. So now we've basically simplified these fractions as far as we can go. The very last step, which I'm going to write over here, is that we have to do the method called bottoms up. Y'all remember me talking about that in class today, or yesterday. What we've got to do, I'm going to rewrite my parentheses here. So any of the fractions that when we divided them they gave us a whole number, they just stay the same. So we know that this one's going to be x minus 5. It's not going to change. We're done with that one. Okay. Now with this first one though, 1 divided by 2 does not, it leaves us with a fraction. Or if we divided that, it would give us a decimal. We can't have that. So what we have to do is the bottoms up method. So we're going to take the number in the bottom, circle it, and move it up in front of the x. So now that's going to become 2x, and then minus 1 stays the same, so minus 1. And this is our final answer. And this is why we call this entire process the bottoms up method. So your final answer is 2x minus 1 times x minus 5. Alright, so now we're going to be on our last example with these. And again, this is another factoring trinomial problem. And again, we've got a leading coefficient out in front. So we've got to do the bottoms up method one more time. So let's go ahead and go through this, go through all the steps again, just like we did a second ago. So the first step we're going to do is we're going to take our leading coefficient and multiply it together with our number in the back. And so what this is going to do is leave us with a positive 30. I didn't do anything to the middle term, so I'm just going to bring it down, negative 13x. And then when I moved the 5 from the front to the back, that left me with just x squared up front. So now we're down to a regular trinomial, which is relatively easy to go ahead and factor. So what we've got to do is draw out our two sets of parentheses, just like we've been doing all day long. X squared, so that means we're going to put an x here and an x here. And now we've got to come up with all of our factors for 30. So we've got 1 times 30 gives me 30. 2 and 15 gives me 30. 3 and 10 gives me 30. And then 5 and 6 gives me 30. And those are all the possible combinations to get a 30. And we've got to figure out which one is going to give me a negative 13. Now, here's the confusing part about this problem specifically, is that we've got two different choices that could possibly give us a 13. First, I'm going to cross out the ones that can't do it. 1 and 30, not going to do it. 5 and 6, if we add those together, that gives me 11, so it's not going to be one of those. But if we did 15 minus 2, that could give us a 13. If we did 3 plus 10, that could give us a 13. So we've got to figure out which one of these is going to do the job for us. So let's do a little thinking here. Let's look at our signs. Our sign in the back is a positive, which means that both of our signs in our answer are going to be the same. They're either going to be both positive or both negative. Now we have to look at our sign in the front. Since it's a negative, that means that both of our signs, both of our signs are going to be negative. Okay? Now, if I put a negative 2 and a negative 15 right there, negative 2 minus 15 gives me negative 17, so that doesn't work. So we can actually scratch that one out. Okay? Now, if we did negative 3 and negative 10, negative 3 minus 10, if you put that in your calculator, gives me negative 13. So there we go. That's the one that's got to work. So you've got to be careful with those. Sometimes you can have two choices trying to get that middle term. You just got to make sure you choose the right one. So now what we've got is we've factored that trinomial. Step number 3 is that we've got to take the leading coefficient way up here in the front at the very beginning of the problem and divide by that number. So we're going to divide by 5 down here. Okay, now let's go ahead and divide these out. So we've got x minus 3/5, because that one won't simplify any farther. And then we have x minus 2, because 10 divided by 5 is 2. Our very last step that we have to do, and again I'm going to write it over here to the right, is we have to do the bottoms up method. Now remember, I'm going to go ahead and draw out my parentheses, because I know I'm going to have two sets of parentheses in my answer. I'm going to take the set of parentheses that divided out evenly. So 10 divided by 5 gave me 2. And so since that's a whole number, I can go ahead and write that one down in my answer. Don't have to do anything else with that one right there at all. Now we've got to come back to the other one though. Since it gave me a fraction, we do the bottoms up method. Take the number that's in the bottom and bring it up in front of that x right there. So that's going to leave me with 5x minus 3 in that set of parentheses. And then both of these together will be your answer. 5x minus 3 times x minus 2.